Okay, let's get to the second statement here. And this one, you want to touch on it. It's Keefe throwing his lines in a blender and benching players. Before I get your take on it, let's run the clip of Keefe after the Red Wings game. He was asked what inspired these changes, these wholesale changes of all 4 of your lines. And this is what he had to say.
Well, just what inspired is just coming off those 2 games and the nature of the back-to-back here. I just felt it was a good time for some change. There's a couple things that I've been wanting to try for some time now. In particular, getting Marner back with Domi. You know, since the one game we did that when Auston was sick, that went really well for us, and I've been wanting to go back to it, but it's just, you know, I just never felt the timing was quite right. So today, to me, it was good timing, and then just the nature of how our game went and some of our guys yesterday, I felt it was good time to change some things.
A good time for change. That makes no sense to me, and I'll tell you why. You're on a back-to-back. The team is obviously struggling since the Islanders game. They lose to the Avalanche back-to-back against Detroit, and you're putting in Ilya Samsonov in net. And I understand it probably wasn't Keefe's call because he mentioned, he was asked about that. He goes, that decision goes beyond me. It's basically what he said. It's an organizational decision. And you thought changing up all 4 of your lines in front of that netminder who needs more protection than any goalie throughout the organization was a good time to make those changes? That makes no sense to me. And some of the players are getting demotion. Matthew Knies to the 4th line? Why? Did you not see TJ Brody against Colorado?
Yeah.
He shouldn't even be playing. He shouldn't have been playing last night if you're trying to send a message. The guys he sends the messages to, and at the weirdest times. I just thought a good time for change is very strange to me, considering you're putting Samsonov in net. He's coming back from 2 or 3 of the worst outings we've seen from a goalie in this organization in a very, very long time. And making these changes when you need the most protection in front of him is baffling, honestly.
Look, Sheldon Keefe, I believe, is in a position right now, and we'll touch on this later on in the pod too, where his job is on the hot seat, right? This team needs to get going, and they need to get going ASAP. Yes, can they just slide into the 3rd spot in the Atlantic Division? Probably, right? Could they fall to a wild card spot? Potentially. But the expectations, Albert, of this season, and we're seeing it kind of come to fruition where Brad Treliving didn't do anything. He's kind of giving it a wait-and-see approach this year that we've both talked about for a long period of time. I think Sheldon Keefe is starting to feel the pressure. He's starting to see that the writing is starting to come on the wall, that if this thing doesn't turn around, my job is in serious jeopardy. And he's starting to change things up and try to do drastic change to just shake up that dressing room. I get the line mixing up and trying to find some new combinations, and I've kind of defended him before on that. But in this particular one, I 100% agree with you. When you have a goalie like Ilya Samsonov, who, yes, you were forced to play him because they probably don't want to burn games on Hildeby and then burn a year of his ECL. You want to maximize your cost control of that guy. But to put him in on a second game of a back-to-back after a disappointing finish, after blowing a big lead to Colorado, you want to play it, I wouldn't say safe, but you want to play the way that guys are comfortable with. Play them with their regular line mates. Play them in their regular routine. You had already a competitive advantage anyway because, like you mentioned, Detroit came 90 minutes before the puck drop, and they still performed better in the 3rd period. The Toronto Maple Leafs right now need to, I don't know if it's a trade they need. I don't know if it's a lashing from Brendan Shanahan. I don't know if it's a firing, but they need something to shake it up, man, because it's getting stale. You can tell guys are not in it all the time. You can see these big dips in play. And Albert, I think Sheldon Keefe, you talked about it last night before we were talking last night, kind of during the game, that Sheldon Keefe could be gone by the All-Star break or in and thereof. Now, I think that's kind of crazy, but the pressure and the heat is turning up on his ass right now, where if he doesn't perform and this team doesn't turn around, he will be gone. And Craig Berube, I think, will be coming in.
This isn't all on Sheldon Keefe. This is also on the players. But it's a bad look for Sheldon Keefe right now because he goes out of his way. He has been more than he has, I think, in his entire tenure with the Toronto Maple Leafs, has been calling them out more and more and more now. But the problem is the players aren't responding. And so when I see no response from the players, no response from your core four, from the Stars, that shows me two things. One, it's a lack of respect. And two, maybe he's losing the dressing room. I have no intel on that, and maybe that's a stretch. But if you're calling out players and they're not responding in the following games, that usually means it's not going in their heads. They're not listening to you. It's falling on deaf ears. And I think that's a problem with Sheldon Keefe right now.
I think you missed another scenario or possibility. The fact is, these guys in the core, they're not built like that. They can't take criticism. You know, you'd always hear the old saying where you either need to kick up the rear end or a pat on the back. These guys in the Leafs, if you show them and you confront them and you test them, what have they ever shown on the ice or off the ice that they're willing to stand up for themselves and push back? Never. Right.
Yeah, but it's not even just that. They're so sheltered and protected by the front office that they're cutting off Keefe's balls. Look what happened with the Nylander situation against Colorado. After the game said Nylander was poor, that line sucked. I had to move Nylander. What does he do? Instead of demoting Nylander, demoting him, he puts him on the first line with Marner and Matthews to get going. If he's been so bad, he's not playing so well, why would you put him on the first line? And I think that's because they're so protected from by Brendan Shanahan and the rest of the organization that Keefe can only do so much.
And look, the Toronto Maple Leafs and that core have just been caught. We've talked about it. They coddle that core. They do whatever they want. They don't test them. They don't push them. They don't put them in uncomfortable positions, right? And I get it. We're in a such state in pro sports now, especially the NHL, where you want to do whatever it takes to keep your star players happy. You want to make sure that they want to be there, they feel comfortable, so you can retain them and you can keep selling jerseys, tickets, all that stuff. But this is a game about winning, right? These guys play the game to win. Yes, to collect a big fat paycheck, of course, but to win, to put banners up in the rafters, right? I look at a guy, again, Canucks bias here, but earlier on in this season, JT Miller took a couple stupid penalties against Nashville. I think it was a game in October or November. Rick Tocchet benches him, doesn't play him. What happens then? JT Miller takes that. Apparently, they got in a big argument in the dressing room in the second intermission, but JT Miller takes that, harnesses that anger, goes out and scores a goal in the third period. Right? Have we ever seen a guy in the Toronto Maple Leafs do something like that, where a coach or somebody pushes at him or tries to push his buttons and he responds? We saw him go after Tyler Bertuzzi one time on the bench this season. Tyler Bertuzzi just straight tuned him out and did nothing about it. I'm not saying go attack your coach or push back, but show a little fight. Show some fire, Albert. Show some desire that, who do you think you are talking to me? I'm William Bleepin Nylander. I just signed an $11.5 million contract, and I'm going to show you why I'm worth every single penny that these guys are paying me. I'm Auston Matthews. I'm leading the league in goals, but I can show you that I can take it to another level. I'm Mitch Marner. I do not understand how these guys cannot have such big egos, have such big contracts, have such big personalities, but can never push back when things are when push comes to shove, right? When I look at this situation, Sheldon Keefe, he's going to be the scapegoat. Absolutely. You can't trade all these guys. You can't release them. You can't cut them, but you can fire one coach, right? And it'll be easy to fire Sheldon Keefe and bring in whomever. Maybe it's a Craig Berube. But Albert, even if it is Craig Berube, we saw what he did in St. Louis near the end of his tenure, just ripping his players in the media, just absolutely sewering them. You think that will fly in Toronto with these guys? Absolutely not. Do you think that Brendan Shanahan and Brad Treliving will ever bring in a coach that will push back at his players, especially after what happened with Mike Babcock with the whole Mitch Marner incident, right? That will never happen. They will bring in a coach similar to what the Edmonton Oilers did, that is a friend or will be more of a partner with their star players. Not a guy that's going to hold them accountable, a guy that will just enable them to continue what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't know who they're going to bring in. It looks likely that it's probably going to happen. Mm-hmm. Does firing Keefe fix anything? Maybe in the short term, there's a short-term boost. But at the end of the day, this team goes as far as their star players take them. Yeah. We see that every playoff. We see that every game. If Matthews, Marner, and Nylander, and Tavares, and even Morgan Rielly aren't playing their best hockey, this team isn't good enough to win. I don't think a coach fixes that.
No.
What's the big change that a coach is going to make? You still need to figure out the rest of your roster for this season and next season. Those fixes need to be made. A coach can't do that. A coach can do some reorganization. And like I said, players are going to get a boost, but it's not really going to fix anything. It's temporary. So that's why I don't really see like going to Berube, or I've heard Joel Quenneville's name thrown out there. I don't know how much that's actually going to change. It's not going to change as long as they're paying 4 players the money that they're paying them. It will never change, unfortunately.
It's culture, right? We're again going back to the NFL. We're talking about a team like the Dallas Cowboys, who put up, again, similar to the Toronto Maple Leafs, put up these big regular season numbers, big stats, put their fan base up, but they don't have the culture and the foundation that when the going gets tough, how do we bounce back? The Cowboys last night got down and then just rolled over and died, right? The Toronto Maple Leafs before have gone down in the face of adversity and given up and quit. And that's not going to change until you bring in the right people that will change the culture, that will change the thought process, that will change the way you think about the game. That starts with the players, that starts with the coaches, that starts with the front office. And that will never change until you build the right culture and the right culture about winning. And the Leafs don't have that.
So for the Keefe out brigade and everyone who's also Marner out brigade, I think the best thing that could probably happen for those people is that the Leafs do not make the playoffs. Keefe will lose his job, and then there'll be a lot of pressure on Shanahan and Tree Living about whether or not they should re-sign Mitch Marner.
Can you imagine if the Leafs don't make the playoffs?
Well, this is okay. So you mentioned it, how we were talking off air the other day about how I said maybe Keefe loses his job over the next couple weeks. This is what they got coming up, right? Before the break. They got Edmonton on Tuesday. You're assuming that the Leafs are going to go there and get slapped up, but we know how the Leafs go. They'll probably put together a pretty good performance. But let's just say they got Edmonton, Calgary on Thursday, Vancouver on Saturday. The Kraken, who've rattled off 9 in a row. They're playing well on Sunday. It's a back-to-back. And then they wrap up before the break with 2 games against Winnipeg, Wednesday night, Saturday night. I don't think that they end up firing Sheldon Keefe during the All-Star break because it's in Toronto. I don't think they want that kind of attention. But coming out of that, they can be out of a playoff spot. And now you really have to look at your coach. People are going to be calling for a change. So I think potentially just after the All-Star break, if this run here from now until the break doesn't go the way that they want it to go, and they lose a lot more games than they win, and they're out of a playoff spot, I think Sheldon Keefe gets the can.